Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the Bailey channel. Today we're wrapping up our first conversation with VOX'S, who is switching from Roll20 to Foundry Virtual Tabletop. Today we actually go through the program and get him set up, and show him a little bit of the ins and outs of Foundry VTT. We hope that you enjoy the rest of this conversation as much as we did.
So what do you guys think about pulling the trigger here and just kind of walking people through the installation process?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the two big things that I'd like to talk about is resources from like a D&D Beyond standpoint, because I like, I can get some things here I saw, and then getting set up with the Foundry here. So as a new user, I just kind of landed on this page after I created my account and everything, and I'll let you guys kind of guide me and tell me what kind of the best course of action to take.
And we'll do a ton of work on how to get content, right? That's really that you want your content at your fingertips. So D&D Beyond, there's a bunch of integrations with Foundry that work great for getting content that you own on D&D Beyond over to your Foundry instance. We'll probably do that in session 2. This will probably just for sake of time, we'll probably just get the world set up and kind of get our canvas ready, if you will. But yeah, let's jump into it. Now, it's been a while since I've installed Foundry. I've been on the platform for a good 2 years now. So let's get to the point where we can download it.
Okay, so thank you very much for your purchase of a Foundry Virtual Tabletop software license. It's exciting. It's the first step on a new adventure.
That's right.
I'm guessing I will get an email.
I believe you'll get an email that'll give you your license information, but also if you go back to your profile page, the 4th option down underneath account settings. So you have the license code key directly beneath purchase software licenses. And so you want to copy and paste that over to like a notepad or something, keep it handy, or you can just have this tab ready. Down below, we have the download the software aspects. And we're probably going to want to stick to version 9 stable. And then if for whatever reason you want to install this as Linux or through Node, then you can do that. But otherwise, the Windows installer is what you're looking for.
So Foundry is on version 9, and version 10 is coming very, very soon. In fact, it's released now. Just the stable release is coming very soon. So you will see, a new set of functionality. The amount of development that happens on Foundry, it would shock you, especially coming from Roll20, where, I know there's been like features that have been requested years ago that still don't exist today. Not only is the Foundry team and Atropos, constantly working on it, but the development community around it making modules it's a very, very prolific ecosystem.
Very cool. So I am just selecting a directory that I have for gaming specifically, and it is an extremely large drive, and that's why it's going there.
Love it. So what Foundry's going to do, I mentioned it before, it's essentially going to set up a server on your local machine. And that server you'll have links that you can send to players to have them join remotely and things like that. And so as a server, it's going to have a place where like all of your content goes, right? So things like scenes and tiles and token artwork and sounds, it's all going to live inside of a Foundry data folder on your local machine. And it's going to serve up those files to players as they load scenes, right? So, it's going to go through the process of setting that up, and it's going to give us the option to set up various worlds on that server. And yeah, I think we should go ahead and run it.
Exciting. Here we go.
Okay. Now we're at the basic starting screen for Foundry. You can see the game worlds is not an option yet because it wants us to pick a game system first. So we want D&D 5e. So you see those two buttons, or I'm sorry, they're not at the bottom there. I'm sorry. Yeah. Install system, the bottom left there. Now you see that search field in the top right. It just defaulted your cursor there. So go ahead and type what is it, D&D 5e?
Yeah.
Let's go ahead
When you
and
start putting in 5e, you'll get
there you go.
Yeah, D&D 5e. And all of these different systems, these are all different rule sets for different tabletop role-playing game systems. So we can see, we've got Ars Magica there, there's Pathfinder, all of those great things. So if you want to run games using any kind of rule set, you got 213 different ones to search through right now. And you can have multiple installed at a time as well. And once you have one that you like, over there on the right, there's the install button.
Now, Atropos, who is the creator of Foundry, he actually also administers the D&D 5e system. That's why you see his name there. And by the way, the Pathfinder systems are really strong on Foundry. There's some other systems like Warhammer that are really, really strong here, and they've got big communities around them that make a lot of custom modules and things like that. And you'll find with with systems like Pathfinder, because the content is so readily available, you'll have a lot of players that will default to that because it's such a good experience.
Yep. I would say that D&D 5e and Pathfinder 2e are the two primary systems that we play with. I'm a big fan of the Pathfinder as well. There's some other creative things in it that I just find flavorful, but I think D&D 5e is one of the best for people learning the systems and getting into the game.
100%. And you can have more than one game system installed. You could install Pathfinder here if you wanted to go in and play with that at some point. You can have any number of them installed. What you'll end up doing is assigning a game system to a particular world.
Yeah, you will probably see in the next few videos that I have started digging in and playing in the meantime, and there will be who knows how many here.
Perfect.
So,
okay, great.
I have 12 or so myself.
So for now, go ahead and close this. And we'll get you familiar with some of the other components here before we go build our world. So this next tab is called add-on modules. And by the way, that game system you saw, those will get updates. Atropos will issue an update, and you'll come in here, and it'll tell you when an update is available. And you'll just click that update button, and it'll essentially give you the freshest content that's been created. Not the content like the books and things like that, but
right.
it'll update, the game system, right?
Yep.
So now go into the add-on modules, and I don't know, Zephyr, I think we should probably get a couple of add-on modules, just kind of starter ones. What do you think?
I would agree. There's a few different really good ones to have right out the gate. So if you click on that install module, then these are all of the different add-on modules that you can get. All right, 1,604, so not quite at 2,000, but we're getting there. So these are all different add-ons that you can have to increase the functionality of Foundry.
Or get new content. Some of these are just map modules where you just get a ton of maps. A lot of them for free. Some of them are, automation technology. Other ones, create effects and special effects. So we're gonna help kind of walk you into these, and it's not uncommon. Once you start getting into modules and finding the ones that you really like, it's not uncommon to have over 50 of these things. So, but we're going to take it slow, and let's start with a couple that are probably going to be more interesting or more helpful than others. So for me, Zephyr, I'm thinking of some core ones that we just want to have in place, like find the culprit.
Yep, absolutely. Find the culprit, I think, is if you have no other module installed, you should have find the culprit installed.
So notice it just types ahead. So as you type, it'll filter down. And find the culprit it's a module that it doesn't do anything until you need it. And what it does is just helps identify modules that may be creating conflicts and things like that. Anytime you're working in an environment that's this prolific in modules, you're going to have modules that, one might conflict with another, things like that. And so this it helps sort of figure out if there's something that's, trying to cause you problems in there. So go ahead and install that. What it's going to do is it's going to use an install link. It's going to go out to the internet, find out where that module is being hosted, and it's going to download it and install it into your instance, which it just did. So now you've got find the culprit in your Foundry instance. And yep, exactly. And we'll show you how to update these as we go as well. Zephyr, what else do you think would be a good starting point? I know you wrote our top 5 modules that you need.
Yeah, I always think Tidy UI game settings is really helpful. And we can even leave that off at first and then show you how helpful that is later.
Perfect.
But it really keeps things nice and clean. So I would always install that one. And there's a couple others that maybe we can hold off a little bit on, but while we're here, we can always add those in as well.
I feel like he's got to install the Bailiwiki free module at least, and we'll get you the premium stuff here too. But type in Bailey. There you go. That one at the top. Those are a bunch of maps and things that we offer free to the community. So if you install that, it's gonna install. This one's gonna be a little bit bigger install because it's gonna download tiles and scenes and other things that you can use, prefabs that you can use as you're kind of building things on the fly.
I will say at this point, the two biggest challenges or feedback points that I get from my players are one, character creation and rolling for various things like attack rolls, saving throws, and skill checks.
Yep.
Great. Then we've got some ideas there. So anytime you install a module, sometimes those modules have dependencies. These are other modules that kind of, a lot of them are core modules that make things work. And in this case, the Bailiwiki Maps requires these three modules: token attacher, libwrapper, and scene pack. You can see how modules will kind of quickly stack up. We'll explain what these do in a second, but go ahead and install these. And it'll automatically go find those and put them into your world.
I like how it does those automatically. There are a lot of other modding tools that I've seen and used in other games, not necessarily just tabletop, that would manually require you to go out and find those three.
Yeah.
And it's, did I get the right version? So it's very nice that I can just get all three of those in one click.
Yeah. Now there are modules, especially a lot of premium content modules, where they are published outside of this directory, and you'll get installation links for those, and it'll work a little bit more like that manual install. But you see that manifest URL field down below, that's where you would paste that link, and it always ends in module.json. For example, we have premium modules, and you can install them here, and it'll do the same thing. They're just not available in the directory. So keep in mind that if you ever run across one that you want to install manually, you do it from the same screen.
Fantastic.
In a similar vein, there's some like modules that, for example, the Bailiwiki Maps pack has those three dependencies, but there are additional modules that we leverage but aren't necessarily required to use it. So those you might have to install manually, as in like going through the same search, going through the list of recommended modules, so you can pick and choose the loadout that you want. When version 10 comes, we'll actually have the ability to have, these are the ones that are absolutely required, and then these are what we recommend, so that you can have those centralized as well, but not quite there yet in version 9.
Cool.
Great. Now, the other things you can find here, you can find audio modules. Michael Gelfi, I believe, has a free module that's got tons of amazing soundtracks and ambience in it. There's so much, and you can see the general categories on the left. I recommend at some point peruse through what you can find here and grab the ones that are interesting, test them, and then uninstall the ones that you don't end up using. And then what do you think? Let's get MIDI-Qual installed, Zephyr, and then we'll kind of dip a toe into that as we go. But there's some automation. If you want to really go into automation, modules like MIDI-Qual can help do a good portion of that. So type in MIDI, M-I-D-I.
Yep. Might have to go up to the all packages to grab that one though.
Ah, yeah, it was filtered. MIDI quality of, let's see, I think it's that one, isn't it? Zephyr, the second one down?
Yep. You want MIDI quality of life improvements, and then the MIDI SRD is also really good.
Yeah, they kind of go together. And we have a whole series actually interviewing the developer of MIDI-Qual. His name's Tim Posney. He's in Australia, I believe. And so there you go. It's a huge module. It does so many things. It's D&D specific, so it doesn't do automation for other game systems. But it's pretty impressive how much you can accomplish there. Okay, so that's the basics of installing modules. We'll end up doing more of these as we go on, but you can go ahead and close out of this. And just go over into that configuration tab. And you can see where here you can set an admin password. You can see the path to your data. That's where, Foundry's going to store a lot of the data that's going to matter to you. You can see the port that this wants to run on, so you can change that, right? So obviously players are going to be coming in from the internet to try to get to your world here. So, for me, I have a Google router. I didn't have to do any setup at all for mine, but other people have to do port forwarding. And so we'll see if that's required as we go.
So as a question here, I installed this on my E drive, the large drive. Can I just change this to a different directory and it automatically updates where it's going to save stuff and pull stuff from? Or is there some additional configuration that I need to handle?
You should be able to just change that to your data path and it will, or to your desired data path, and then it will update that.
Okay.
We can double check that for sure afterwards. I think it might have gotten confused by the specific path that you did, so it made this default one. But I do believe that you can configure that.
So Vox, the last tab before we get into Game Worlds is Update Software. You won't do much in here most often. If you stay on the stable build, which we recommend for anyone who's running games, stay on the stable build. There's other builds that are for like the module community that has to stay ahead of development, things like that. This is where you're going to go in and actually update your software when it's time. The one thing I have to mention though is when you do update Foundry, I believe that you have to open it and run it as an administrator, right, Zephyr? If you're on Windows?
Yeah, it depends on your particular security settings, et cetera, and what app permissions you have, but that is important to note. And usually it'll restart Foundry as well.
Yeah. So whenever I know I'm going to update it, it'll throw an error for me if I don't run it as an administrator. Normally I don't have to run Foundry as an administrator, but specifically when I have to update, and that's going to be maybe every couple of months, then I will open it up as an administrator and then I'll go through the process here. And it's literally just as easy as clicking check for updates and it'll do it. Now, with that said, you should, version 10 is coming out soon. You should definitely not update to version 10 right away. Usually there's some, like any software, you're going to want to let some of the bugs are being worked out now with version 10, but there'll still be a few. And what it will also do is there'll be a lag between when the version updates and then when all the modules that you like, when those are really fully supporting version 10. So I just don't want anybody to ever like try to ride the lightning here and upgrade too soon, especially if you're running a live game. You want to, be lagging behind, a major version update, probably by at least a couple of weeks, maybe a month, typically. All right. All right. With that said, let's go build a world.
Sounds great.
All right. So let's create a world on the right there. And you can change this stuff later, but we want to give it a title. There you go. You can
Shout
see
out to all the programmers out there.
That's right. And now we want to give it a game system. There you go.
We only have the one installed. That's only going to pull the one currently, right?
Exactly. Now there's even customizations you can do to your splash screen and your login screen. You can add background images and stuff. There's even modules that will affect those, but we won't worry about that for right now. You can get creative later. And then you can also just sort of say when your next session's coming. You can describe your world in any kind of way, including being able to put links. Maybe you want to put a link to your Discord if you're doing that, and images, that sort of thing. Love it.
All right.
All right. Engage.
Create the world. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
That was it. You got a world. All right, now you'll notice you can edit it. You can delete that world, but we're going to launch it and we're just going to kind of jump in and show you what's going on. So from this screen, this is really the screen where you and your players will ultimately find. So if you had created a splash image, for example, it would fill the screen. You'll notice that you have a user drop-down list and you probably only have GM listed. Yeah, there you go. And so you'll select that. You'll end up creating a password and stuff later. And notice you have down below that administrative password. You'll also want to set one of those up later. That gives you the ability to come in here and essentially by entering the admin password and saying return to setup, it'll shut down your Foundry host and it'll get you back to that setup screen where you can add modules and things like that, right?
Okay.
But for right now, essentially your server is running. Like if we
Okay.
had your IP address or knew the link to your server, we could come join you here right now. We'd also need a user account to log in with. We'll show you how to add those here.
Perfect.
But right now, I don't think you've got any passwords set up. So I think if you hit join game, it'll just let you right in. There you go. Okay, now you're looking at the Foundry, you know, a blank Foundry system. You can see some instructions, some getting started instructions on the right. Things like how to, you know, create invitation links and port forwarding guide if you need to use that. And so, you know, you can keep those up and come back later and kind of refer back to those if you feel like you're having any problems. But I just wanted to get you a quick orientation of what you're looking at. And I think that'll probably be a good stopping point for tonight and kind of give you like some things that you might want to be playing around with before next session. Does that sound good?
Sounds fantastic.
All right. So we've got a blank scene screen here. We don't have a scene set up yet. So let's go to the right and I'll orientate you around these tabs that you see on the right-hand side. So this first tab is your chat tab. That's where, you know, if you're used to Roll20, it's where everything's going to be sort of, you know, it's going to be a infinite scroll of what's happening in the game. This is going to be where, you know, attack cards and damage gets calculated. It's going to be where players are chatting back and forth, things like that. You've got down below, you know, where you would actually do the chatting. You can, you know, create roles and things like that. That's another module we should install. Zephyr is just the, I forget what it's called, but it makes it really easy to pick the dice you want to roll. But that's essentially dice tray. That's right. What dice tray do, it'll introduce all of the dice in the game down below so that you can just click on them and makes it really easy for you and the players.
Oh, so good.
So up above, the next tab over, you see a fist. That is your combat tracker. And go ahead and right click that fist for me. So that pops out the combat tracker. So when you're actually running combat, you can have it sort of a floating window where it just makes it easier to manage because you may want to have the chat up and have your combat tracker over there. And if you right click that fist again, it'll make it disappear, or you can just close the tracker also. Oh, did it not disappear? Oh, I was wrong about that. There you go. The next tab is your scenes. So this is going to be where you set up your scenes. You can have them sit inside folders. There's a bunch of modules that will change the functionality of this tab and do some other stuff that's kind of neat. But let's just go ahead and create a basic scene right now. Give it any old name. Great. So it gave us the scene background, and then it gives us the settings that we can make some adjustments. We can always come back in here later and do it. We won't walk you through all the scene settings, but they're fairly intuitive and probably stuff that you would recognize from Roll20. Yes. What I want to do is get you familiar with some of maybe the differences between Roll20 and Foundry, just in case you've got certain things that you're used to.
Perfect.
All right. So go ahead and click Save Changes. And just to show you how to get back to that, if you right click the scene on the right hand side and you see Configure, that gets you back to that screen.
Oh, okay.
And you see how it showed up above in your it's a scene of the first. There you go. If you right click that as well, you can go to the Configure there too.
Cool.
Good. All right. So that's the basics of getting a scene set up, and you'll end up having lots of those. And let's keep going through those tabs on the right. The next one over is your actors directory. This is going to be where your players' actors are going to be, where your non-player characters, even vehicles, these are all going to live over here. You can see that you can create an actor, and it will be fairly intuitive, I think, how to create one here. But what we'll want to show you is, also how to create actors and pull from the SRD and other content that you might have. So we'll do that in another session. Next tab over is your items. Now in Foundry, I don't remember how it is in Roll20, but it's almost like everything is an item. So an item can be a weapon. Um, in fact, if you click
Spell.
a spell, yeah, exactly. A feat can be an item. And if you click create item, that button there at the top.
Create item.
Yep. You see that drop down below that says weapon in it?
Oh, okay.
These are all the things that can be items in here, right? So you can see it's a lot. Even a class can be an item. And
those will also vary a bit from system to system. So that list is slightly different for D&D 5e versus maybe Pathfinder or like Savage Worlds or something like that.
Exactly. And this is a very drag and drop friendly system. So, you can create a weapon, drag it onto a player's sheet and, and drag it off, and it all kind of works that way. So that's how items work. Next up is your journal entries. There's a ton of modules that will modify journal entries to the point where, you can have journals be like fully functioning vendors for you. Where players can come in and shop on their own. They don't even need you to help, and they can go, shop for items, and it can populate off of roll tables and all sorts of crazy stuff that's available in journals. But at a very basic level, a journal is something that you can show to a player like a handout, or it can be something that you keep for yourself. We'll walk you through some of that stuff when we get into setup later. Next up are your roll tables. There's a ton of content out there that you can import for roll tables. And those can drive a lot of things, like I mentioned, all sorts of stuff, even encounters. Next up are your card stacks. So I haven't actually played with cards yet, but there's a whole card system in Foundry where if you do want to have card games and things like that, you can build them here. Next up is sound. And this is going to be where you have playlists, and then you have your sounds living inside of playlists. And you'll find once we get sounds into the world, we'll have the ability to control different types of sound, ambient sounds versus music, background music, things like that.
Beautiful.
Next up are your compendium packs. This is going to be where most of your content is going to sit. And you can see there's already some populated. These are all the SRDs for D&D 5e. And if you open up one of those, just go ahead and open up Monsters, for example.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you can see there's a bunch, all the SRD content is preloaded, and some of it even comes with, artwork. And we'll show you how to get artwork for everything else. But yeah, go ahead and drag something out. So,
couldn't help myself.
What's that?
I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, I know. I love it. That's what we want, right? Just start playing around with it and see if you can break it. And I don't know what you dragged out there, but go ahead and double click on that. Oh, Ancient Red Dragon. That's why it's so many squares, right? And then, so, there's your Ancient Red Dragon, and you can see features, spellbook effects. There's modules that can change the style and layout of this card also, which I use for my games, right? I use a custom module that customizes this for me. It can consolidate it, make it smaller, easier to kind of get at all the information.
Now, these are things that are specifically seen by the DM, right? These aren't like the.
Yeah. So if this is, everything is permissions based. And so the DM has the ability to see everything, but your players can't see this unless they have permission to actually see the sheet. So that's how you control things as a DM. Your player would be able to open up their sheet and move their token, but not have the ability to affect others.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
And now I want you to do one more thing. You can close that Red Dragon sheet, and then I want you to right click that token. So you notice all this HUD that showed up all around it?
Oh, yeah.
There's a ton of options there. There's modules that will change all kinds of things about this HUD. But this is something to get familiar with too, right? So you can make it invisible. You can assign status effects. Those status effects can actually cause, damage over time and things like that, depending on what automation that we've employed. And there's even a gear over there. And we'll walk you through like how to do combat and things like that, how to assign this player to combat. But that's essentially, anything you drag onto the map, if you right click it, you can generally interact with it there too. But yeah, that's the compendiums. Again, when we start pulling in content from D&D Beyond, it's going to go into compendiums. The big thing to remember about compendiums, it's like they're like an icebox. It's where everything sits that is not active in your world. So like you don't want to import the entire monster SRD into your world, because when you do, the server needs to load all of that stuff up every time, and it needs to load it for every single player. It's not necessary. It's going to, for performance reasons and just sanity, it's not good to do. So compendiums are the ice boxes that keep all of your content that you're not sort of actively working on or planning on using. Make sense?
Yep. Sounds
Cool.
good. I like it.
You think of them as like instruction manuals that you could pull out, and then they have a bunch of content associated with them. So you can always delete stuff that you've imported into your world, and they'll just be always sitting in your compendiums. Okay, last tab is the kind of gears. And these are going to be your major settings, right? So you can see your Foundry settings at the top. That will be important when we get to things like, if we want to optimize things for performance, stuff like that. You can see the kinds of controls if you want to get into keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that. How you just navigate around Foundry can be helpful. Manage modules, click on that one. Here's all those modules you just installed. You notice none of them are checked. That means they're not active. So they're not actually doing anything. They live in the world, but they haven't actually done anything yet. So go ahead and click on, what would be a good one? Here, let's do this as a simple way to show you. So go over to the right again and click on Configure Settings, the very top button. And you see you have 3 tabs at the top. This first tab is your core settings, and we'll get into that another time. And then you've got your system settings, which we'll also get into in another time. But over on the far right, you have module settings. And, none of the modules have any settings? That's funny.
Well, none of them are enabled just yet.
Oh, that's right. They're not enabled. Okay, so let's do this. Let's enable all those modules now, except for Tidy UI. So select everything except Tidy UI. Oh, you'll notice if there's a dependency, it'll say, do you want to enable the dependencies? And you generally want to say yes. It'll automatically enable the modules that it needs. Okay, so you've got everything selected. Click Save Module Settings. It's going to refresh the scene, and it's going to enable these modules that we just installed. Here's an example of one, Simple Calendar. You can close that for now. Now go back into the gears on the right, the gear tab, and go down to Manage Modules. Actually, go to Configure Settings and go to the module settings on the right.
A lot more here now.
Right. So here's all of the different settings for these different modules. Now, what I want you to do, and you notice if you had 100 modules, you'd scroll forever. So now go back over there and activate the Tidy UI module, the one that you didn't activate last time. Yeah, and then save module settings. Okay, now go back into your configure settings, module settings.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. So that's how modules work. They can really, change so many things. And this entire UI is all based on APIs that developers come in and change things around. So there you go. You've got a good start to your world. The next session will really be like how to pull in content, how to create characters, how to level up characters, stuff like that is all things that we'll get into. But just to kind of give you the last bit of sort of, what are you looking at? On the left-hand side, you've got all of the tools, and I don't know, would we call them layers? Is that what Foundry uses? But these are, I guess they're probably different layers. So you have that token layer that's selected, right? That means that you can interact with that token that's in the middle of the scene. And you can do other things that some of these were introduced by other modules. If you go down to the next layer, that looks like a little ruler. This is where you can add, you can add, spell effects that cover a particular area, right? And if you have to delete that spell effect, just click on that little thing in the middle. See how it kind of turned red, and then click the delete button.
Beautiful.
And it gets rid of it. Now the next one down is tiles. tile controls. There's really 2 layers to Foundry that deal in tiles. There's foreground and background layer. And this is just where, and you don't really have tiles to drag in yet, but this is where you'll drag in artwork to add to a scene, for example. And there is the concept of foreground because in Foundry, you have the ability to actually have maps that are not just one-dimensional maps. You can have tiles sitting above tokens, and you can have multiple stories. So you have to use some modules to do it, but we'll get into like the different foreground, background stuff with tiles later. But the next tool down, that little pencil, that is your drawing layer. And this is where you can create drawings in Foundry on the fly. There's a bunch of modules that will help you leverage this layer. You can almost have it be like a whiteboard that you can, if you want to show users, hey, I want you to go to this area, you want to, scribble around it, you can do that. And you can change the defaults and, make it solid colors, and there's effects that you can apply. You can, there's fire effects that you can, make fires break out on your scenes, all sorts of stuff that we can do here. So the next layer down after drawings is your wall layer.
Well, I broke it.
If you hit
How do I stop
escape,
it?
you should be able to stop. You also need to double click. Oh, sorry, not escape for that.
Oh,
There
okay.
you go.
Wall layer is going to be where you set up all kinds of different and interesting walls. Go ahead and put a wall down. See that it looks, yeah, that one is your basic wall. Now double click into one of the nodes at the end of that wall. And you can see this wall has normal movement restriction, but go ahead and click on that drop down. And you can see that you can take away movement restriction. You can have that wall restrict movement, but not light or not sight or just sound restrictions. It can be a one-way wall. It can be a door. It can be a secret door. You have a ton of options with how you design your scenes with walls. And it's pretty intuitive and really easy to use.
And so I take it that this just kind of sits within the graphics of the scene and everything. It's not like they actually see.
Exactly. So like watch this. So hit Control Z, that'll always undo placing a wall. And go to your token layer over on the left and just select that token. And put them down somewhere.
You might have to have token vision turned on.
Yeah, that's right.
To see the site.
Let's go through that. So I want you to double right click that token. There you go. This is the token's configuration. This is where you can, change its color and stuff like that. But go to that vision tab. And this token, we want this token to actually have vision, right? So we want them to not be able to see around walls and things like that. And we'll leave the rest of those at default. So go ahead and click update. And you see that wall that you placed? Now you can walk around. Yes. And did you notice it was a dark black before you walked around it? That was because that was fog of war. You couldn't see around it. And now that you've gone around it, it's a lighter shade. So you wouldn't be able to see a token on the other side of that wall, but you could see the artwork, for example, if we had artwork there. But you're going to love designing scenes with Foundry because it just works. There's a lot of options. We haven't even talked about lighting. That's the next one down. The lighting in Foundry is insanely good. It's one of the reasons why people just go to Foundry is because the lighting is so well done and it's so dynamic. We don't have any artwork to really show it off, but we will. But you can make flickering lights and lights that are, like fog. It's almost like creating animation in your scenes with very, very modest resources. But here you've got fog of war that you can reset if you ever need to do that. And there's modules that will give you all kinds of fog of war functionality. Now the next two down, just to kind of finish up, that's sounds, where you can place sound beacons. So just click on your scene and drag out like you were creating a light. Yeah, with that tool there. So you can see that's a sound beacon. You can assign a sound to it, and it'll also, if you make it that way, be restricted by walls and things like that. So
Oh,
there's all kinds of fun things that you can do with sound and having it get louder as tokens get closer to it. Having it only be active during certain times of day. Same thing with lights. You can have a scene lit up at night, and then when it's daytime, all the lights turn off. So a bunch of really cool sort of out of the box functionality there. And then the last tab is your map notes. This is where you can put a pin on the map that would, and actually you can't really create that from the screen, but if you had a journal entry, you could drag it onto the map and it would create a pin. And,
okay.
and that pin then you can interact with as a GM, or you can make it visible to players and they can interact with it. Down below is where your players will ultimately live. You can see you just there right now as the GM, but your players will be there too. And then that bar to the right is your macro bar. There's all kinds of modifications we can do to this, but that's where you and your players can put macros that you guys want to use often. You'll find that Foundry will let you do a lot of automation without needing so many macros. I think macros is a much bigger thing in the Roll20 community, but you'll certainly find macros and many uses for macros here, and that's where they'll live. All right, so that's the basic interface. Do you feel like you're orientated enough to do some damage?
Yeah, I'm really anxious to jump into this. This is one of those things that I'm really excited about what I'm seeing here. And it's just like, this is the type of thing I could sit down in front of, and before I know it, it's 12 hours later.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Now let's, I want you to just see some content. So go into your Compendium tab. Do you remember which one that is? It's the second to the end.
I believe it's this one right here.
Yep. And you'll see down below Bailey Wiki, go all the way down, scroll till it stops. And you see you have scenes there, Bailey Wiki Maps scenes. Go ahead and open that up. And there's a module that you'll need to install if you want to get this all organized for you. But for right now, Zephyr, what do you think would be a good one? You just did the recent release for the free module.
Well, so with the free module, I recently added in better walls and levels and everything. So we would need to have those installed for optimal functionality, but we could do the ghost ship, I think, is a pretty good demonstration of lighting engine, and it's a single level. So we can see a lot of the stuff going on there.
Perfect. So right click that and say import entry. And this is now the config for the ghost ship. So you'll just save changes. And you see it over on the right?
Oh, I do. I see it popped up over here now.
Yeah, right click on that and say activate. That's going to activate that scene. If you had players, it would draw the players into the scene. And so this is just, a really simple scene right off the bat. There's sounds and stuff on here, which you could get to if you drag a player onto the scene. So if you had an actor.
We can also use the, on your sound tool, you can click, there's an earmuffs icon.
Oh yeah.
And then it'll function like a preview. They added that. I can't remember exactly when.
Yeah, so on the left, the little sound note. Yep.
Oh my gosh, guys. And so when I just hover over this, it's when I.
Exactly. And I believe there's lighting on this scene too, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing the flickering and the.
Yeah, it might be a little bright at the moment, so we might want to turn down the scene darkness.
Yeah, so right click on the scene, either on the right hand side or up above where you see the shortcut to it. You right click on it, go into the config, and then go to lighting. And see that darkness level is at the far left. Drop it down, maybe make it all the way dark, as a matter of fact. Just see what that looks like.
So this way?
Yep, and then save changes.
Oh,
there you go.
Got it. Oh, I didn't save the changes.
Exactly, right?
Lesson learned.
Right, so now we've got a nice ambiance. We've got you heard the sounds there. You can right click that sound beacon and it'll turn it off, right? So if you ever want to like turn a light off or turn a sound off, you can control that as the GM. But that's really, basic stuff, right? So now you drag in a few tokens and you've got a scene that players are going to be like, this is already cool. But wait, there's so much more that we'll show you as we go further in this series. But that's the basics. You're now working in Foundry, and really at this point it's about getting content in and getting your world set up and really building up to your first game. So with that, I feel like we accomplished a lot today, guys.
Absolutely, this is great. This gives me a lot of good ideas. I'm excited to see what's next, because this looks amazing.
Love it. All right, well, Vox, thanks for letting us do this with you, go on this journey with you.
Yep.
Zephyr, thanks for co-piloting this with me, and I'm definitely looking forward to the next session. Everybody in the comments, let us know what you think we should cover with Vox. If you have any, favorite modules or things like that, if you heard something in this session that you think that we should be thinking about as we go forward. But I'm really excited about where we're going with this. I can tell that you're going to have a lot of fun with it. And anything else to add, guys, before we close up?
Oh, thanks everybody for watching, and the feedback is going to be great. And I'm excited to see what the community throws at me too, and how I can share what I learned with the community as well. It's going to be a good adventure in itself.
Fantastic. Well, I wish I had this when I was starting with Foundry, because I was just clicking on things and breaking stuff for far too long. So I hope this helps everybody else, and even helps the veterans out here really understand, from start to finish, what this can really do. So thanks, guys, for joining us, and we will tune in for the next episode.
Fantastic.
See
y'all later.
See you guys.